What's up, everyone? It's Jordan and Lisa.
Hello.
Hey, Lisa. Welcome to another piano lesson. We're doing a first,
Yes.
very ground one
Yes.
piano lesson. So we're talking about music theory and notes and just
keyboard.
first stuff, how to just pick things out on the keyboard and stuff like that.
So this would be for somebody who's maybe never played a piano in their whole entire life.
Yeah.
So we're gonna look at the very ground up, but there'll be stuff in there for the beginner too, I'm sure.
For everyone.
Yeah, everybody.
Nice. Okay, so before we get started, I'll just say if you have any questions, just hit the Ask a Question button below, and we'll answer them on stream. And yeah, let's take it away.
Let's rock and roll. Okay, so I wanted to take you through how I would teach a first lesson to a brand new student. So we're gonna start with just kind of getting comfortable with the keyboard. So the first things first is noticing that whether you have a piano or a keyboard, or a baby grand in your house, or a little tiny keyboard, you're gonna have black keys and you're gonna have white keys. So if you take a minute to look at your keyboard, you'll notice that we've got groups of 2 black keys, and then 3, and then 2, and then 3, and that pattern just continues all the way up in these little groupings of 2 and 3. So in the beginning, we're not actually going to use the black keys very much, but they're really useful as a landmark because it helps us figure out kind of the geography, I guess we could call that, of the keyboard.
Cool.
So as just kind of like a first thing, I love to encourage everybody to just play all the groups of 2 because it helps your eye to start tracking. So even if it seems like a really simple kind of dumb thing to do, you're actually developing the skill of tracking on the keyboard the distance of between those kind of groupings. And then same thing with the group of 3s. And if we had lots of time, I would do each hand one at a time. Maybe I'd play the notes separately. Kind of just get myself kind of comfortable and set up at my piano. So that's the first thing. You notice you've got black keys, you've got white keys. The black keys are grouped in groups of 2 and groups of 3s.
Nice.
Yes. So once you know that, you have to know that each key on the piano is assigned a letter. And we have a special alphabet with music. It's shorter. So we go from A to G, and then we repeat ourselves. So there's no H in music. So we go A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. It just keeps on going forever and ever.
H is yet to be discovered.
Yes.
There's scientists deep under the ground working on finding H.
Yes. They'll never find it. So we've got our A through our G. And the tricky part at the beginning is just figuring out what key is what on the piano. So I go back to the concept of landmarks. So if you find a group of 2, you want to find one right in the middle, and you look kind of in the center of it, you've got D. I'll just tell you out the gates. I'm not going to explain why it's D, it's just D. There's D. So there's another group of 2 in the middle. We got another D, group of 2, D. Notice how I'm playing the D with this finger, because we're going to come back to that later. So I'm going to play all the Ds, just creating a familiarity with the keyboard. So group of 2 in the center, we've got D. And the alphabet, right below D, we have C. So look at this. This is D, this is C. This is another note that's really good to become super, super speedy at locating because a lot of times we use C as our home base note. So you find the group of 2, middle's D, just below that, we've got our C. So if you're following along at home, I think that would be great for you to go and play all the C's, all the D's. And then my second landmark note is if we follow this group of 3, and we take from the bottom, and we kind of slide down. That's F. So those are kind of an easy, quick one to find as well because we're looking at the base of this group of 3. So we've got landmarks. We've got D, we've got C, we've got F, and then we use our logical brain to kind of determine the rest. So if this is C, this must be D. This must be E. We've got F, G. What's after G?
Nothing. Well,
A. Not H. Yeah. B, C, D, E, F, G. And you can see it just keeps on repeating. So there's more than one A, more than one B, more than one C. And again, depending on the size of your piano, it will depend on how many of those options that you have.
Right.
So pretty straightforward so far. We've got the alphabet. Now, if you're really, really, truly a beginner, this in itself is actually going to be a lot to kind of to learn because it takes time to really memorize this is C, this is A. So it's good to challenge yourself sometimes. I have my little dice. I forgot them today. But my little dice, you can roll them, and they have all the little music alphabet on them. And if it rolls to A, I'm going to find the A's.
Okay.
And so on and so forth. So if you're really new and you want to just work on building familiarity with the keyboard, that's a great thing to do. You can pull them out of a hat.
Yeah.
Create your own little system of learning.
Yeah. I actually have a question for you on that.
Yes.
It just came to mind. A lot of new students, they like to do they put the tape on each key
Yes.
and write that out. What do you think of that? Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing?
That's a good question. I discourage it personally because I feel like not every piano is going to have the tape. So eventually you're going to be in a position where you're not going to have that. And I feel like it can kind of become a bit of a crutch. So if you are really struggling, what I suggest doing is maybe just putting a dot on your landmark notes. So maybe you have a blue dot on the C's and maybe a red dot on the F's. Something like that. So you still have to think about what's before and after it, but you have a quick start kind of to help you out.
Right.
That would be my suggestion. That was a good question.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Okay, so now that we're learning our way around the keyboard and we're getting comfortable with how everything kind of looks, we're going to talk about our finger numbers because that's really important. So especially when it comes to technique and sight reading, fingering becomes, I don't know, very, very critical. So 10 fingers for most of us, and we number them 1 through 5. So our thumbs are 1, pointers are 2, middle is 3, ring finger is 4, and baby is 5. So 1 through 5. So what we're going to have to do is get kind of accustomed to placing our hands on the keyboard in a way that's going to allow us to play efficiently. We need good posture. So my seat's a little bit high. You should be kind of level with your knees. And your knees should be just below the bottom of the piano. You should have a nice tall posture. Your wrists should be just above the keys. And notice how I'm not down here. My wrists are kind of up. Like there's little strings attached to them with some buoyancy. So middle of the keyboard, so find what feels like the middle to you. Find the most middle group of 2 and locate C. So I'm going to place my 1 finger on C, and I'm going to line my 2nd finger up with D, my 3rd with E, my 4th with F, and my 5th with G. So if you are brand new at learning the piano, this in itself can be really complicated. So a lot of times I'll see this happen, or they're really struggling to kind of line the fingers up properly. Don't be alarmed if that's the case for you, because this actually will become like second nature. Do you think about it when you place your hand on the piano anymore?
No, I don't.
Yeah. Your fingers just learn to line up naturally over each of the keys. And I'm just using the white keys for this. My thumb is on C, and I like to start my first lessons always with teaching a 5-finger scale, because it doesn't matter what your level is, this is going to start to develop some dexterity and kind of get you familiar with how the keyboard works. So all you need to do is play each note that is underneath each of your 5 fingers, and that's what I call a 5-finger scale. So it's pretty simple, but again, like I said, if you're new, the coordination is going to feel really awkward, and it's going to take time to find it. So I also call this stepping up so high and down so low. That puts kind of some words to what's actually happening with the pitch. We're moving up in steps, and we're moving down in steps.
Okay.
So I find that's helpful too, because that's going to come into play later as well.
Yeah.
So I suggest that you find the middle C, and play a 5-finger scale in the right hand, and you can play it in continuous motion, I don't know, 5, 10 times until it feels like you can do it without having to think about what you're doing.
Yeah.
Then you're going to take your left hand, and we're going to place our 5-finger on C this time. So I'm not going to use the same C that my right hand played. I'm going to use the one below it. So here's my group of 2, and here's the C. My 5th finger is going to go on the C, and again, I'm going to line my fingers up. I want my wrist slightly up, and I want a nice curl in my fingers so that I can really make my way around those keys. Flat fingers are hard to play with. Same thing here. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. And just getting used to that motion. It's simply complicated. And once you have that, we can do hands together. And you just kind of keep rolling at a speed that feels comfortable for you until the exercise feels like kind of second nature.
Cool.
So far, so good?
Yeah, can I ask a question
Yes.
from a user here? So we got a question from Linux Tux Friend, kind of on what you're just talking about there. Hand independence is a tough thing for me. How do you best acquire that?
Repetition.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think hand independence is something that is constantly coming up, and I think for me, you know, even at this point in my musical journey, I still struggle with it. So when I sit down and I need to develop that, I really take my hands apart. I know that my left hand is my less dominant hand. I'm going to struggle mostly with this one.
Yeah.
So I like to start there. I find that intentional weight in the keys is really, really good for establishing the muscle memory that you need for hand independence.
Yeah.
So if I'm playing really lightly and I'm not really thinking about what I'm doing, I'm not creating those pathways in my brain, I'm not creating that connection as well as if I was super focused, I was leaning down, putting weight into each of the keys, so I'm really connecting to what I'm doing. That's a really good way to start working on hand independence.
Right.
And then as you kind of progress, working on the hand-ins, that's super, super helpful
Yeah.
for hand independence. And if we have time today, we can even look at one of those at the end.
Okay.
So I hope that helps a
Yeah.
bit.
No, I think
Takes
so.
time. Focus on your non-dominant hand. Take things slow. Metronome is always helpful to keep your rhythm consistent, and start slow, work your way up. Really lean into those keys.
Yeah.
Okay. So we've learned the 5-finger scale. The next thing I like to show on a first lesson is actually a full scale. So this can be kind of complicated because we have to do some kind of crazy hand work, but it's fun and it feels super good when you've played your first scale and you kind of get that little fingering change. It's like, wow,
Yeah.
I can play anything. So it's
Yeah.
a really, really wonderful sense of accomplishment that comes with it.
Yeah.
So what it means to play a scale is to play 8 notes. So for a C scale, I'd start on C, I'd go all the way up to C, and I'd come back down. So those are kind of all the notes in the little C family. And in C scale, it's all white keys. But as you can see, I have 5 fingers, and there's 8 notes. So that's where it gets complicated. So to play a C scale, you're going to place your thumb on C, and you're going to look for that good hand positioning. Does each finger line up over a note? That's really important at the beginning. Each finger lines up over a key. And you start with your thumb, and you play your 1, your 2, your 3. Now, at the point of the 3, I glue my finger down. I'm going to pretend like my finger's actually glued there because this is going to help with the next step. I'm going to swing my thumb underneath. Notice how my elbow kind of moves a bit? Swing my thumb underneath, and I'm going to land on F. And as I push this next key down, I'm going to release my 3rd finger. And I'm going to reset my hand. See how they all line up over the keys? And it lines up so that I end on C. So now all I have to do is push down each finger, and I land at the top where I wanted to be. So it looks simple, but it actually can be complicated. So I'm going to show you again. 1, 2, 3, tuck, reset the hand, and you can get all the way to the top. And then you just basically go down the way you came. So when you hit your 1 finger, again, sort of freeze there, curl that 3rd finger over, release, reset your hand, and that's the C scale. So it might take a few tries, but again, sense of accomplishment with the scale is really, really fun. And this is another way to build dexterity, familiarity with the keyboard, and learn how to play your first scales. Because if you're embarking on the journey of being a piano player, usually there's a fair bit of scale playing involved. So my left hand, same thing. You'll notice that when I start with left hand, I always use my 5 finger first. So it's kind of the reverse of what I did with my right. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Flip my 3rd finger over. 3, 2, 1. And then back down the way I came. So I have to remember that when I hit my 3rd finger here, I need to freeze and tuck my thumb. Reset my hand, and there's my C scale. I'll do it one more time. Fly over. 2, 3, tuck under. And we can do it hands together, which is really complicated. So if you're brand new to this, this will not come very easily, unless you're naturally extremely gifted, in which case, congratulations. So that's a C scale.
Cool.
Okay, so how's everybody doing so far?
I think we're
Everybody's
doing good. Yeah.
Okay, so that's the C scale. I recommend saying the note names out loud as you play. You might feel a little bit silly saying them out loud, but again, that's going to help to establish a memory and familiarity with the keys and what their names are, because that's super important. Okay, so we've got our kind of introduction to the keyboard. We've talked about posture. We've looked at landmark notes and how to, develop a familiarity with what keys what. We know our musical alphabet and our 5-finger scale and then our full C scale. So I wanted to quickly show you the next thing, which is a chord. So I feel that if you can walk away from your first experience with the piano knowing how to find the notes, play the scales, and play a chord, you're going to have lots to kind of work with. So a chord just simply means, in this case, playing 3 notes stacked on top of each other. So again, if I place my hand in C position, each of my fingers lines up over a note. I want to practice pushing my 1st, my 3rd, and my 5th finger down. And that creates a chord. And learning to play chords is the beginning of being able to play songs by ear or accompany yourself as a singer or playing with a band. It's kind of the first step.
Yeah.
Would you agree?
Yeah, I think so.
So that's why I like to introduce them right away, because it does involve a certain level of coordination. What you'll find if you're new is that all your fingers want to push down. It's really hard to just play those 3. So you see how my 2 and my 4 kind of hover? I'm going to curl my fingers a little more this time. So be just aware that this can take time. You can roll your fingers kind of through that chord shape. You can play it solid, which means all the notes at the same time. A bunch of times. Same thing with your left hand. So C position means 5 on C. And then a few chords. That's C chord.
Right.
So if you're rocking with that, you can play a chord starting on any note on the keyboard, which is not only fun, but it sounds cool. So go to town. Practice identifying notes and playing chords on them. Okay, so far so good?
Yeah.
Okay, so the next thing I want to look at, this is a lot of information in a short period of time, but it's good because you get the download of all the stuff and then you can kind of absorb it at your own pace and come back and then you do it again, and I feel like it's a good process for learning.
Yeah.
So if you're going to be playing the piano, chances are at some point in time you're going to have to encounter notation, which is not my favorite thing, but I've gotten really, really good at understanding the basics of it. So notes, I mean, everybody, when I say the word notes, usually has some kind of picture in their mind of what a note looks like. And when I ask a first-time student to draw a note, this is usually what I get. Pretend like this is colored in. And guys, I am not an artist. So this is usually what I get. That's usually what they say is a note. So that is a note. And notes have value. And when I say value, it means depending on what the note looks like, it tells us how long to play the sound for. So this guy here, he's a circle, he's colored in, there's a stem out the top. That's called a quarter note. I call it a ta because ta has 1 syllable and this note gets 1 beat. So I could go ta, 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 ta.
Right.
That's how that works.
Okay.
Okay, so that's a ta, or a quarter note. Okay, so the next one that I like to look at is a half note, and it looks almost the same, but we don't color a half note in. And this guy equals 2. So, to show you how that looks, we're going to go ta, ta, half note, ta, ta, half note, ta, ta, half note. So I'm just holding the note for 2 beats instead of 1. So it's pretty simple.
Yeah.
And guys, get a piece of paper and draw these because it's fun. Okay, so we've got a ta, we've got a half note. We can put a dot beside a half note, and now it's going to equal 3. I call this half note dot because 3 syllables, it's helpful. Ta, ta, half note, dot. 3 beats. Then we've got a great big whole note, which again, it's just called a whole note, but if I say great big whole note, I'm taking up 4 syllables, so if I have to count out loud while I'm playing, it encourages me to hold the note for this full amount of time.
That's cool.
I know, you sound kind of silly.
Yeah, but it works.
Great big whole note.
Yeah.
But it really works. Now, there is kind of a floating scale for whole notes. Whole notes will they always equal the full value of the time signature that they're in, so don't worry too much. They usually mean 4, but they're kind of a chameleon note. We can talk about that later. For now, it equals 4. Music, you'll find that there's the rules, and then there's all the exceptions to the rules. Kind of like learning a language. I don't know. So, ta, ta, half note, ta, ta, half note, great big whole note. So that's how that works. I'm going to show you one more note. I like this one best. This is an 8th note. So as you can see, it looks like a ta, but it has a little flag off the the side. And this guy equals 1/2 of a beat. So you might be like, oh my gosh, what? How do you make a half of a beat? Just means you play it quickly. So I'm going to show you. If we take a 8th note and put it beside another 8th note, you're going to know exactly. You'll have seen this before. 2 halves make a whole. So whenever we have 2 8th notes beside each other, instead of drawing their stems kind of down like that, we connect them like this. See? So we got 1 beat. That's a half, and that's a half, and together they equal 1. And I call that a TT because, okay, so you be the ta, so you give me a ta, just tap and say ta.
Ta.
Over and over, be really annoying.
Ta.
So
Ta.
TT goes like this, T, T, T,
Ta.
T, T,
Ta.
T. So you see
Ta.
how I can
Ta.
kind of say 2 things
Ta.
in the time it's taking
Ta.
him to say 1,
Ta.
and that's how a TT
Ta.
works.
Okay. Yeah.
Right.
Cool.
Pretty straightforward.
So we got tas, we got TTs, we got half notes, and we got great big whole notes.
And a dotted half note.
And okay.
I know I threw that in there, half note dot. So watch
Right.
this. Ta, ta, T, T, ta.
Nice.
Kind of fun. They're little quick notes.
Yeah.
So ta's like walking. TTs are like running.
Okay.
Make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah, I think so.
So that's like a very basic introduction to rhythm and how it works within music. So I always expose my students to this right out the gates because even though we don't usually look at a notated piece of music at the beginning, if we can start to learn this right away, it's going to help us when we actually have to play something that's requiring us to hold on to the different beats. So far, so good. Any questions?
Let's see if we got any ones about this here. We do have one from Ishmael Hudson. He says, sometimes after practicing piano, I feel pain in my shoulders and my fingers and a bit in my wrist. From where should I exert energy when playing various notes?
That is a good question. It sounds to me like your posture's maybe not the best. So I would be looking at, how is your bench set up? Are you at the right height from the piano? Like I said, this is a little bit high. I should be kind of level with, my feet should be flat on the floor, and I should be kind of having a level slope at my legs, somewhere like this. My knees are just directly behind, and I'm sitting nice and tall. So I'm not slouching, I'm not in an armchair,
Yeah.
I'm not cross-legged,
Yeah.
sitting well, and again, my shoulders are down and back. So the energy kind of that's happening, it's mostly kind of occurring from my hand and my arm.
Right.
I feel that, right?
Yeah.
Is that kind of where you feel it too?
Yeah, I think so too.
So if your posture is good, then I say that your playing should feel good. I'd be curious to know how long you're sitting at the piano. I mean, if you're sitting there for 3 hours, you're going to probably feel sore and tired.
Yeah.
But sometimes a chiropractor or somebody to maybe make sure that your back's all where it should be is a good thing to do, especially if you're doing something repetitively.
Yeah, I think a lot of times new players miss, they don't think enough about the forearm being where a lot of your power and accuracy does come from. So make sure that you're also kind of thinking about what your forearm's doing while you're playing.
Yeah, for sure.
We actually got a part 2 to this question.
Oh, good.
Yeah, so I'm just going to kind of paraphrase it here.
Okay.
Does that energy exertion change with the different techniques, piano playing techniques? So he's asking questions like arpeggios or...
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think body mechanics are so important, especially, for example, if I'm playing an arpeggio, watch my elbow. My elbow's kind of leading the way, right? So I don't want to play an arpeggio like this. I'm going to get really sore. Look at my wrist is down and my shoulders are crunched. I have to have fluidity in my body, and I am hovering my wrist over. So it's basically like the pressure's occurring all through here rather than just at my fingers or just at my wrist. So, you might find for some things that, your energy transfer, it's really close. I'm just really pushing my fingers down for this 5-finger scale.
Right.
But if I'm playing something wild, like a really fast arpeggio, it's involving more energy, more bounce in my wrist, more bounce from my shoulder. That's my thinking about it anyways.
Okay, cool. I'll ask you one more question that we got here. It's from Gaurav Sankyan. So we were talking a little bit about 4/time back there. You were just mentioning that 4/4 was kind of what basing this off. He's got some questions just about 3/4
Yes.
Just if you can demo how that sounds and how to play in that time signature.
Okay, so let's do a little example of 4/4 and a little example of 3/4 here. So I'm going to create little measures with my super awesome art skills and straight lines. Don't judge. Okay, so this is 4/4 and this is 3/4. So what I've created here are little kind of boxes, cages, measures. They're technically called measures. But in my mind, to help compartmentalize, I kind of think of them in terms of like a little box. So in each of these, we get a certain number of beats. So this number on top tells us that we get 4 beats, and each beat's value is a quarter. So here we get 3 beats, and each beat's value is a quarter as well. So that means that in each of these little boxes, we can fit 4 beats. In each of these guys, we get to fit 3. Now, 4/4 timing, I might create something like, okay, a half note equals 2, and then so I'm gonna let that half note have its 2 beats. Watch this. So this one counts for both of those. And then I'm gonna give TT 1, and I'm gonna do ta for 1. And then here I'm gonna do a great big whole note. And he gets to take up this whole measure. So it's gonna sound like this. Half note, TT ta, great big whole note. And in 4/4 time, we have kind of an accent on the beats. We have strong beat, weak beat, medium beat, weak beat. So this is a little more technical. You don't have to think about it too hard. But when we think about 4/4, it kind of sounds like this: 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's how 4/4 set up.
Yeah.
So far, so good?
So far, so good to me.
Okay. Then in 3/4, we have a completely different vibe. 3/4 feels like waltzy, kind of.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So that's more like a strong, weak, weak, strong, weak, weak. And I might go, if I did all tas here, 1, 2, 3, that means that a whole note is now going to have a value of 3 instead of 4, because a whole note gets the whole value of the measure it's in. So watch this. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. It's waltzy. It's different.
Yeah.
Is that helpful? Did that answer your question? So far, so good?
Yeah, I think that works.
Okay. Sweet. I will erase my whiteboard, and then we'll do a quick look at the staff and how those are set up. And this is where it gets crazy, guys. So if you follow me over here, we have this lovely magnetized board, and this is what we call the staff. So we've got this symbol here, which is called treble clef, or treble clef. And this one here is called the bass clef. So usually, when you see a treble clef, it means you're going to play with your right hand. And usually, when you see a bass clef, it means you're going to play with your left hand. Treble clef has a nickname, and so does bass clef. So this is also known as the G clef. And you'll notice that the little curl of the treble clef wraps around the second line, which happens to be G.
Oh, cool. Very cool.
Magic.
Yeah.
This guy's nickname is the F clef because his little dot here lands on line 1, 2, 3, 4, which is the note F. So F clef and G clef. So those are some really quick shortcuts to help you kind of know, hey, look at that. That's what this note is. That's what this note is. Learning to read notes is crazy hard. I've never found learning to read notes easy. It's basically like learning a new language.
Yeah.
So it takes time and it takes patience. And the process of learning to read notes and then also simultaneously play them with your right hand and your left hand is just gigantic.
Yeah.
So that's why it's good to start with really simple music. But I just wanted to introduce you to how the staff looks. So when you're looking at a piece of music, you're not going to have this center line here. But I've got this here because this kind of indicates the middle. So this is like treble clef land, this is bass clef land, and then this is the in-between. So this line here represents middle C. Middle C on the piano is right here. So this is an important thing to get comfortable with. I always tell my students, this note is your best friend. You have to know what this one is. It's the beginning, kind of, and it relates to the middle C on your piano. So that's really fundamental. So after C, we have D, and then we have E, and then we have F. I'm just going to borrow magnets. G. After G, we have A, and then B, C, D, it goes on and repeats itself. So the old school, old-fashioned tricks. Have you ever had anybody tell you to spell the word face in the treble clef?
Yeah, stuff like that.
Yeah. You know what? I try not to teach those at the very beginning, but they are super helpful. So if you can spell the word face, those are the letter names that would be located in the spaces of the treble clef. F, A, C, E. So if I know this is F, and I know that this is A, logic tells me after F, this note would be G. If this is A, then this must be B. F, A, C. So that's kind of how this works. It takes time, guys. This is not an overnight thing. Some of you will find that this comes really quick. Some of you will find that this is like pulling teeth. But, you know, it is what it is, and this is how we read notes. So in the bass clef, the popular one is, for this bass, is all cows eat grass. So this would be A. This would be C. This would be E. And this would be G. So these are left hands, and these are right hands. So far, so good?
Yeah.
Are you tracking? Is it making sense?
I'm tracking. I'm certainly tracking.
So that's an introduction to the staff and how it works. One thing that's really, really good to develop early on is an understanding of steps and jumps, because this will come in super useful later. What I've created here, I'm going to use my little marker. I'm going to make another dot. There you go. I've created stepping up so high. I've created that 5-finger C scale that we played at the beginning. So each of these notes is moving up in one increment from one spot to the next possible spot. We've got a line note, we've got a space note. We've got a line note, we've got a note in the space, and then we've got another note on the line. So this plays out like this.
Okay.
So you're learning to see that they're just steps apart. Now, if I take this away, and I take this away, put this here because it's easier visually. We've got a line note, we are skipping the space, we've got a line note, we are skipping the space, and we've got a line note. This is the jump up high chord pattern I showed you earlier. C, skip D, go to E, skip F, go to G. That's how a chord looks, starting on C, written on a staff.
Right.
Straightforward.
Cool.
But again, it takes time. So when you're learning to play sheet music, you'll learn to go, okay, well, I know this is C. I know I'm skipping a note, so I'm not even going to think about what that is called. I'm going to go, I know I'm playing C and skipping a note.
Yeah.
So you learn to play based on interval, distance between notes, rather than actually having to stop and think, oh my gosh, C, E, G. So that is the basic introduction to the staff. I'll show you here. All cows, we've got a C. We're going to skip a note, and then we're going to skip a note, and we've got our C chord in the left hand. I've written it this way. But if I stack them on top like this, like a snowman, that means play them all at the same time.
Cool.
So there you have it. That is like the turbo speed first lesson introduction to the keyboard.
Yeah.
So now we can open it up to questions and maybe show a Hanon.
Yeah, well, actually, there was a question earlier on in this lesson about the Hanons.
Oh, okay.
So I'm going to kind of paraphrase it here, and I hope I'm getting this right. This is from Delano Douglas. He's saying that the Hanon exercise is tough to drill with his fingers. Like, what speed should you be getting them at, or is there an optimal tempo to be working with Hanon exercises? The
optimal tempo is the tempo that's just below uncomfortable.
Just below uncomfortable. Okay.
So if you go here, and you're like, oh my goodness, I had to think so hard. That was really tricky, and I can't maintain a consistent tempo quite. So if I have to go, right? If you're not able to be consistent and even, that means you're too fast. So there's really no such thing as too slow. So I like to suggest starting super slow, like snail slow. I'm playing my Hanon wrong already. And even this speed is okay. You can say the note names. That will help to develop familiarity with the keyboard, all that stuff. And then once you're comfy, bump it up by, I'd say, like 3 points.
Okay, like three BPMs?
Yeah, thank you. Oh my gosh, 3 BPMs at a time until you find your ceiling. And your ceiling is just that point where you're almost like, I almost didn't make it, but I did. That's your optimal speed.
Yeah.
And then you stay there until that's cozy, and then you bump up again.
Yeah.
That would be what I would do.
Cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. Yeah, there's no questions in at the moment that have yet to be answered. But if there are anyone out there, if there's anyone out there that does have some questions, get them in now.
Yes.
Is there anything else that you want to talk about, Lisa?
Well, I feel like that is everything that I would look at on a kind of a base level for the keyboard. I'd love to show a hand in because I think that's a really good sort of beginner exercise. You know, these have been around, you know, since the beginning of time, I'm fairly certain. Did you ever have to play hand-ins when you were?
I did, yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Right? That I had the big old book that said like 25 cents because it was probably my grandpa's.
Yeah.
Yeah, with all the hand-ins in it.
Yeah.
And I didn't love them, but
No.
you know, I have like a sense of like old sort of nostalgia.
A kind of like grudging respect for
Yeah,
them.
grudging
That's what I have.
respect.
Yeah.
So a Hannon is kind of, it's a man's last name. I can't remember his first name, but his last name was Hannon.
Yeah.
And he created a collection of sort of hand exercises for the piano. And they're kind of, they're universal now. So the one I most recall starts with your 1, you skip a note. So notice this is my C position. But to play Hannon, I'm going to bop my second finger up a step. So, and when I did that, it reset my hand, so now my thumb is on the next note. Bop up a step. And you just carry on like that, basically forever. But I suggest going until you hit the note an octave above the one you started on, if that makes sense. So in this case, I'm going to hit C.
Okay.
I might have not done that exactly to the book, but that's how I recall it. Left hand's the same thing. You skip a note, so my 4 hits the E. This one feels really awkward for me because that dexterity in the 4th finger is not a strong finger, which is why this is such a genius sort of exercise, because it's really causing me to connect to and work with that 4 finger. Now, the beautiful thing about Hannons is sky's the limit. You can change up your rhythm pattern. So we looked at kind of different rhythms on our notation. So I might go, okay, I've mastered that in its basic form. I'm going to create a new rhythm for it. I'm going to go, right? So now the accents, everything's kind of changed, and I have to think about it differently. So it's one of those things, sky's the limit, really.
Yeah.
And then there's a whole bunch of different hand-ins, so that's just one of them. That's the easy one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, like one of the main challenges with any new piano player is obviously getting both your hands together. When you're doing those hand-in exercises, like when's the point when you can start introducing both hands together?
When you can play each hand by itself at a moderate tempo, so I'd say this is about moderate, not too fast, not too slow. When you can do that without steadying your hands like this, when you can do it so you can kind of maybe have a chat while then you're ready to go hands together.
Yeah.
Now the tricky thing, what makes hands together so challenging is that your kind of fingers are doing different things. So my 1 finger starting, my right hand, but my 5 finger is starting in my left hand. So my brain kind of goes, oh my gosh, what do I do? So instead of thinking so much about finger numbers, I think about distance, and I find that that's really helpful in helping me to coordinate my hands together. So my distance is I have to do a skip. I have to skip a note. I have to jump over the next one. So whatever that looks like, that momentum of I'm here now, and I need to end up here. And then I know that the distance I'm traveling is just kind of 1 step up and down, and I don't have to think about it again until I have to make that little leap here. And that's how I kind of develop the hands together. Slow, lots of weight in the keys, being intentional, being kind. You know, maybe this is as far as you get for day 1. Peace out, I'm done, I did it, right?
Yeah.
And that's okay. So you don't feel like you have to sit there and accomplish the whole thing in one day. Take your time, make it baby steps.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good advice.
Thanks.
Okay, is that all we got for this one?
That's all we really,
Yeah.
that's it in a nutshell. So if anybody has questions, I'm happy to answer them. Other than that, happy playing.
Yeah. Well, I don't see any more questions, so I think maybe we'll just call it there. There's a ton of stuff for this though. Like there's tons of ways
There's
to kind
so
of
much.
go out from this now.
There are so many ways to go out for this. So go back to pianote.com where you can find, we have sheet music, especially in the core curriculum of our membership, there's a lot of sheet music in there. So the beautiful thing is we've got the lesson set up so that you can view the lesson and learn the core skills, and then the sheet music is there for you to explore. So you have an auditory example example of it, you get to hear it. You have a visual example, you get to hear it, see it played, and then you get to try it on your own.
Try it
so
out.
if you're struggling, you can kind of reference back. Oh, that's how this sounded, or if you're more visual, that's how that looked.
Yeah.
So you have that. I say, to develop sight reading skills, you want to be picking a piece of music that feels really, as easy as you can find it. In the beginning, nothing's easy.
Yeah.
But once you kind of get your feet, pick stuff that's as simple as, it feels kind of good for you. So if I'm going to sit down and pick like a Chopin, I'm going to lose my mind. I'm going to go back a few levels and I'm going to find something that's simple and fun and just makes me think a little bit. And then again, just like with the sort of scales and hanons, it's incremental. You just build slowly.
Yeah.
That's my suggestion.
Sweet.
There we go.
Beautiful.
There we go. That's the first piano lesson.
First piano lesson.
So much information.
Yeah. Piano day one.
Piano day one.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks for stopping by and
having
teaching all this.
me. Okay, we'll see you.
Sweet. Yeah. See you guys later.
Bye.
Bye-bye.